Hey there, and how's it going? I'm an author and I read my own story and I'm so proud of myself and I just want to share it with you. Do I keep that one or do it again? Anywho, I'm not going to do it again. So, what I did today, you'll be so excited to hear me read Godsknife Lineage, or at least I hope you'll be excited to hear it. I'm not an expert narrator, but I read to my kids a lot, and I know how to read, and I love to read, so hopefully I did a good job. This is a side story about James, the son of a fallen hero, and I don't want to give away much. It's a short story, but it is kind of a cool intro to Godsknife, the world, and how it's an alternate dimension. So there's already been a World War III in this world, and that's all before the events of Godsknife Revolt. So this is just kind of a sneak peek. Please check out Godsknife Revolt and stay tuned for the sequel, Godsknife Revenge, that I'm working on right now. And follow me at wardbook.com. Thank you and enjoy the story. A Godsknife short story by Timothy C. Ward. That would be me. A heavy rap beat woke James to his bedroom in darkness, a headache that wouldn't quit, and the dirty promise of one more day. He reached over to his bedside table and knocked over a couple of items, as Method Man spit lyrics to Triumph by Wu-Tang Clan. Blessed the globe with the pestilence, the harder never learn. He silenced the music, then squinted to check the time. 4:10. With his mom still unemployed, James had to help Bill clean the school before and after basketball practice. Coach T had told him the next C he got on his report card would be his last, and he still had 2 years left of high school. Asshole knows if I don't have b-ball, I don't have nothing. So James had stayed up last night, studying the major events leading up to Britain's bombing of Manhattan. Mrs. Roberts made brutal tests, and his quiz scores since his C had hovered around 80%. If he didn't get at least 90% on his test today, he could kiss his scholarship dreams goodbye. No scholarship, no college. No college? I don't want to go to war. If Mom loses me too. If he wasn't around, Greg would no doubt start hitting James' mom again. James flushed the toilet as snores from Anderson, his mom's live-in boyfriend, sawed through their bedroom walls, even into the bathroom. After brushing his teeth, he opened the door to his mom, waiting in the hall. She held her robe tight and squinted against the light. He leaned in and kissed her cheek, checking that she didn't have any bruises on her face or forearms. She seemed clear. What are you doing up, Ma? Job interview. I know, but it's 4:15. What time's the interview? 8, but I have to study. She started shutting the door into the bathroom. Tuna's in the fridge. I know. The door stopped with a crack of light between it and the frame. Don't give me that. Better than rocks. James shut the front door to the sound of Dr. Dre beating his eardrums, slung his gym bag over his shoulder, and built into an urgent jog across the front yard. His sidewalk led past the train tracks and, at the bottom of the hill, connected with the school's parking lot. As he passed beside the football field, a healthy sweat beaded on his forehead, cooled by the early summer morning. He made it to the gym's south door at 4:28, tossed his bag onto the bench by his locker, and sprinted through the gym. Bill pushed the squeaky-wheeled mop bucket past the principal's office. The generator lights glared on the tile in the hallway middles, leaving the exteriors in shadow. The older man's disappointed stare formed its own kind of shadow. James pulled out his earbuds. Sorry, Mr. Toppin. His old comrade shook his head. What do you think would happen if they tipped the ball at 4:30 and you gave them a full minute to score at will before you graced the court with your presence? Can't play defense when you're where you're not. Can't play defense where you're not. James kept running until the last second and grabbed the handle of the bucket. I'll make up for it. Think that excuse would work, Coach T? Boy, you'd be on suicides for 20 minutes. What are we working for anyway? If you're gonna keep behaving like this. I was up late studying history. Test today on the Manhattan Advance. You ever hear Jordan complain about his home life as an excuse for a bad game? Didn't need to. Even his worst games were better than most anybody else's. He looked up from the mop bucket to Bill, watching him with a smile. Your worst games aren't that good yet, nor is your work here. Bill picked his work gloves off a table beside the window by the cafeteria. It's only when you learn to do everything well that you excel at what you care most about. James nodded and pulled his earbuds out of his pocket. I want you to think about that this morning. James offered a weak raise and briefer eye contact, returning to his Beats player to pick up where his last song had left off. He felt Mr. Toppin's stare before the old man turned into the cafeteria and left him to his work. He pressed play. Dum-de-dum. The bass started. Dum-de-dum. What's the difference between me and you? James pushed chemical-scented water over the glassy tile floor and thought about Mr. Toppin's advice. What it would mean to do everything well. Shit, I barely get to do everything, and it's killing me. That shit's impractical. He played over last night in his head. After school, he went to practice. After a shower, he went with Glennon to his house for dinner so he can get something besides tuna Alfredo for one meal out of 6. Sure, they worked a half hour or so of Call of Duty Chaos Invasion into their night, but was he supposed to work every minute of the day? He needed that distraction to refresh before hitting the books for almost 4 hours, after which he passed out in his jeans. How am I supposed to do this any better? I've just survived until the shots start falling. James transferred that frustration into his mop strokes and kicked up a gear to finish the haul. He pushed his janitor cart to the men's bathroom, and Bill came out of the door connecting the cafeteria to the locker room hallway. James gave a less than enthusiastic nod and continued his path to the bathroom. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Bill's lips moving, the man's words muted by the lyrics blasting in James' ear, ripping free from KC with a dope beat. Bill pursued him and caught James by the elbow with a strong grip, and one of his earbuds ripped out. Boy, look me in the eye. James took out the other earbud and stood straight, shooting his best mess with someone else look. Oh, keep acting hard. See how long it takes to replace you. Nothing like Connor. Boy showed up 10 minutes early every day and finished with time to spare. It's too bad he got drafted then, isn't it? James left out the part about the young man getting killed within 4 months of landing in London. Sad anger reflected in Bill's gaze implied he was thinking the same thing. It is. Maybe I should get it over with. Buy a fake, skip the pond too. Even with the peace treaty, the war enterprise continued, always ready to turn a blind eye to stupid young kids willing to risk their necks for a steady meal. Bill chewed his lip as anger turned his skin a faint shade of red. Your dad deserves better than that. Make her rest his soul. He didn't go over there to avoid life, or you and your mother. No, but he did though, didn't he? James' grip on the cart tightened enough to numb below his knuckles. And that's not his fault, nor is it something you should resent. Not from him, anyway. He deserves more. Bill closed within a foot of nose-to-nose with James. He deserves more. More out of you, and less of this garbage you bring to work and take home every day. Plenty of garbage to go around, especially at my house. Too bad my dad didn't think about how his lost life would lead to the next man in his bed. And Bill slammed a fist onto James' cart with a loud bang. A plastic bottle fell off the side and slapped the floor. Enough. I'll fire you right now. You say one more thing to disrespect your father. He's a hero. He exhaled through widened nostrils and stepped away, his stare showing that struggle he had in not choking James where he stood, or something to that effect. You know why I hired you? Could have chose at least 20 kids with better work ethic than you. You know why? Your father, that's why. Oh, I'm so glad the perks live. Bill took a step right back toward him. James cut himself off before the old man decked him. Fire blazed in Bill's blue eyes. The sagging skin under his right eye pulsed and veins rose to the surface. Were I 20 years younger and a few feet more bone than metal, I would have gone with them. It would have been an honor. We are alive because of their push in the Big Bend. You have a life because they gave theirs. Bill relaxed his stance, giving a foot or two of breathing room between them. His eyes glossed with the start of tears. If you were my father... Yes, definitely tears. I would rise up every damn day with so much fire. He shook a fist. I'd dare anything to get in my way before I burned it down and showed him that his sacrifice would never, not for one damn minute, be wasted or spit upon. The tickle of new tears infected James as well. No, don't you dare. He couldn't. Once these tears break through, it would be all over. Bill exhibited the same struggle before wrapping James in his cologne scent and old man strength. A most welcome hug. Bill's shirt was slightly damp from hard work, and everything about the man impressed James in that moment. From his wisdom to his willingness to challenge James with a truth he couldn't deny, and in his support, empathetic to a need James tried to hide from the world. James hated that his father had died in the assault that killed British Prime Minister Houghton. He hated it, but he knew it had to be, as though carved in the path humanity was fated to endure. He hated it because it was real, undeniable, and that it showed how strong pain and suffering could be, how long it could endure in spite of every prayer and effort otherwise. He hated the hard truth of his father's death, and he also understood the respect that Mr. Toppin had for his father because of it. What he still didn't understand was how his dad could love his family so much that he'd give his life to let them live theirs in peace. Without him, what kind of strength did that take? How would it feel to possess such courage? James had no idea, and every day that passed without him finding that answer was another day of failure to the man who no doubt was watching him from above. How can I do everything well, he stammered, when I can't figure out how to do one single thing that would make him proud? Weakness broke through James like a frozen river, cracking him down the middle, leaving him standing only due to the grace of Bill's grip. His sobs sounded like those of a girl's, and yet he rattled on in his struggle to breathe. Mucus clogged every inhale and hung over his lips, and he accidentally wiped some on Bill's collar. He snipped it back too late, leaving a yellow string on the red flannel. He shrugged miserably. I'm sorry. It's okay. Bill continued his hold. No, you don't apologize for loving your father. I know it hurts. I lost mine too, to cancer. James regained enough strength to stand on his own. Separating from Bill's hug, he wiped his eyes and tore a sheet of paper towel. First for Bill's collar, then for his nose. I didn't know that. I was only a few years older than you when he passed. He interrupted that line of thought with, oh, don't worry about that, when James wiped his collar. It took me quite a few years to learn what I had to from the loss of him. James blew his nose. When he finished, he asked, and what was that? Well, it wasn't just one thing. I'm still learning, because the way we become men our fathers are proud of is by applying wisdom to everything we do. Your father doesn't care if you join the Marines and end a war. He'd hate it if you let that kind of expectation cripple your self-confidence like it has. That was exactly it. The size of his father's imprint on their world left him atop the cliff, looking around in wonder, trying to determine how he could possibly succeed his lineage. Bill set his hand on James' jaw, holding his gaze before James could send it elsewhere. Stop it, son. From your father's spirit to my lips, hear me. He loves you no matter what. He understands that you will need time to become the man he knows you can be. If you give up, you never will. I don't believe for a second that you ever would. You and your father are too much alike for that. But that doesn't mean I won't get right ticked off to see you pissing away time as though you had an endless supply. He gripped James' chin more firmly, locking their stare. You know that's not true. James knew. Lack of time was part of what weighed on him each day. Time to do everything on his plate. Time to make up the widening gap between him and his father's image. Even if he became the best basketball player the world had ever seen, it wouldn't come close to ending the war that almost ended their country. Even as China bucked up against their Rocky Mountain border and the La Alianza fleet filled the Gulf and Pacific, the future of America hung by a thread. But his father was part of the force who saved that last thread from being cut. James had no idea how he could ever do so much for so many. Bill let go of James' chin and pointed at his nose. Even now I see you making plans. You won't ever give up. You're just tired. Tired and lost. Building castle foundations everywhere you go because you think nothing else will satisfy. He paused and offered a bright smile. Son, just worry about cleaning them toilets. I'll hit the girls' bathroom, then we'll meet in the middle and take out the cafeteria. You don't have. No, I don't. But for your father and for you, I will. I love history. I'm going to quiz you while we work. Make sure you're nice and fresh for your test today. Pointed again at James' face. And then, I'm never going to worry again about you coming in late for work, am I? Right? Yes, sir. That's right. James put his pen down and stretched his aching hand. The final question on his test required an essay response, listing 3 ways New York could have bolstered their sewer system to avoid the devastation of the Manhattan Advance. His final lines read, in conclusion, while these 3 areas would have helped prevent the flooding that ultimately doomed our defensive efforts, the real way we as a country can defend against future attacks is to live with the memory of what it took for those who fought on that day. We apply their courage to simple tasks. Difficult tasks as one unified effort will find the secret to their success. Those who died and those who survived. Those who were successful even if the end result didn't appear to say so. The heroes I choose to believe in are those who saw the steps placed before them and didn't hesitate to put their footprint in its place. My father was not a supernatural force. He was a tremendous hero, but he was just a man who saw the challenge and soldiered on. No matter what calling has been delivered before us, we can all soldier on. And in the memory of my father and so many heroes before him, I promise to do the same. James fought to control the heated tears that brimmed under his eyelids. When he looked up and caught Mrs. Roberts watching him, he almost lost it. When he closed his eyes, they washed over and he had to wipe them clean. But after he did, he looked back at Mrs. Roberts and smiled. She did too. Her eyes approved. A lightness in his spirit implied his father might have as well. James had worked hard to study for this test and sat confident that his answers reflected understanding of the tactical weaknesses and efforts displayed that day. The most important lessons from this challenge, the most important result, was that he saw what he believed his father wanted him to see. That I see with the eyes he wants me to see with, he read out loud. His mom's lips quivered and a tear streaked down one side of her face. She reached across the table to grab his hand. Her nails pinched in his palm, but he squeezed right back. He pushed aside his taco basket and wiped a shredded cheddar from her wrist. Her lips continued to press together even as her mascara-lined eyes begged for them to release. A pair of older women seated at a table on the other side of the aisle had turned to watch him. He wondered if they too lost loved ones in the war. Their attempts to hold back tears were more successful than his mother's, though he could tell his words had struck a chord. "I can't," his mother began, dabbing her eye with a napkin. "I can't tell you how proud your father would be. How, how proud I am to see you growing up." A tremor in James's chest threatened to rise with his own tears, but he inhaled to keep them down and nodded. "I have tried so hard." His mother put the napkin to her lips and paused, her gaze falling to the table. After composing herself, she continued, looking back to her son with strength. "To soldier on, as you call it, but not every decision has been the best." She took another breath and fanned at her eyes. A shadow cut across her face from the window beside them. "I know you don't like Anderson," and she lowered her voice and leaned forward. "Out of the sun. I haven't wanted to tell you because, frankly, I thought I was soldiering on, but hearing you read those words, I realize now that I haven't been. I saw." She reached for his paper and lifted it up to read. "The calling before me, and I backed right the void up. Anderson caught me when I thought I was falling, and I refused to see that he was only taking me down with him." James smiled. This was what he had been waiting to hear since the first time he woke up to Anderson's truck revving in their driveway. "I've been thinking this for probably a few months," his mother added. "I didn't tell you because I knew that as soon as I did, there'd be no going back. I suppose now that the cat's out of the bag, we make plans for telling him he's got to go, paycheck or not." She handed him back his test, the red-inked 95, clear to see from the top corner. "One more reason to celebrate me getting hired today. I might need to ask Mom for a small loan, but in a month or so, this job will pay that off, and we'll be on our way to getting back on our feet. So much to be thankful for today." She sipped from her straw the last bubbles of water from her cup, and as she turned to grab her purse, a shadow draped over her face and kept spreading. Her gaze darted up to the window, and she instantly froze. "James, run!" The window shattered inward under the force of a 4-foot green claw. Its arc defied James' new reality, the one that said everything was getting better, that his family was closer than it had been since that stammering lieutenant had told him and his mother that his father was killed in action. Not since those words had his heart been this light and brimming with joy. As the claw arced toward his mother, the heaviness returned, anchoring him in his seat. Only his open mouth escaped the paralysis. His mother's shoulders slumped and her head drifted to face her son, but she didn't have time to achieve anything but a split second of eye contact before the claws snipped her head clean off. A blink in time separated the last moment of his mother's life from her love-frozen gaze to the blankness that took off as her head rotated upward on a geyser of bright red blood. The monster that rode in on the claw's other end looked like a cross between a dinosaur and a human dressed in an elaborate costume. The woman across the aisle screamed and shielded their face as it collided with his mother's corpse. The monster's foot landed on James' tray and shot it into the aisle, and the monster slipped after it. As the giant bug collided with the garbage container, James retrieved his father's combat knife and palmed his basketball, ready to throw. He slid his legs out from under the table and lunged. The monster staggered awkwardly from its collision, with one arm appearing broken. Its big eyes and antenna looked just like an enlarged praying mantis. Its recovery and the speed in its slashing claw shocked James off balance. His head remained attached to his neck only because he'd already been shifting to his right and managed to twist out of the way. The sharpened claw had cut a hot line through his left shoulder, but in the bug's failed attack, James found his leverage. He threw his basketball through the open path into the giant bug's head. The crack of impact dented the mantis's green skull, slowing the rest of its reflexes enough for him to jam his blade between its bulging eyes. Yellow blood sprayed his arm. He yanked his knife free and rose to the rushed exodus of Tasty Taco customers. He caught a corner view of blood on the tile and averted his gaze before it found his mother. He would remember his mother in the moments before. not like this. A second praying mantis broke through a window a few aisles down. His calling was now clear, although heavier than he'd expected, but then it must have seemed the same way for his father. In that moment, he knew what his father had said, overwhelmed and yet yanked forward with an urgency once one measure greater than the fear that threatened to consume him. And just like his father, he did not back down. James soldiered on. Well, hey, thanks for listening to me read my story. I hope you think I did a good job. Here's the page that we have over at evolvepub.com/books/Godsknife, one word, -lineage. If you go to this page, you can get a free version of this story by signing up to our newsletter. That's one thing I'd help out with Evolved. We're going to get that newsletter going for our horror team and get some more content, author interviews, and all that. You can also buy Godsknife Lineage at Amazon. And if you want to go to Ward Book, oh, that's not the right answer. Ward Book. Boom, shakalaka. Here we are. This is my site. And you can check things out. I got the GotBooks show over here. Oh, what do we got? Look at that. Boom, boom. Bunch of Dave, Lane Diamond. We're going to get some more people on the show. But right now, he's leading off, doing a great job. And I've also got a books page. We can look at the Godsknife page. What? So wardbook.com/Godsknife is another place you can go to check that out. All right, folks. Thanks for watching, listening. Have a great rest of your day.